Good morning and welcome back to the Digital Publishing Summit Online for a new session today about Thorium. So let's be direct. The first goal of Thorium Reader is to provide Windows and Linux users with an equivalent of Apple iBooks, an app people use daily to read EPUB 3 publications, an app which is highly accessible, a reference implementation, in fact. But it is more than that. Thorium is today capable of handling audiobooks and soon digital comics. So we call it DiViNa. Also, Thorium handles LCP protected ebooks and soon LCP protected PDF files, which breaks the barriers built by proprietary DRMs. Because of that, Thorium is also an alternative to iBooks on the Mac platform. Thorium is therefore a great choice for library patrons willing to read on their desktop device, for people buying books from independent booksellers or registered as an ebook subscription service, for students getting ebooks from their university. Thorium is also multilingual and does not leak personal data. Thorium is based on the Radium Desktop Toolkit. It is totally open source and has already been adapted to specific needs by some organizations like Ekitabu in Rwanda for education of African children and Thirsty in the UK. Other adaptations will follow, but let's not forget that Thorium is free. It's a free end user app. Therefore, it can simply be recommended by libraries, universities, without any adaptation needed, as far as the required features are present and the UX, UI is adequate. In most cases, it is better to help Idea Lab for the maintenance of Thorium than spending money creating a clone. Thorium and Radium Desktop are developed by a small team at Idea Lab. Daniel Weck, who will be our speaker today, and Pierre Leroux. Other developers have participated to this development before, especially Cyril Lebopin, who started the project. Daniel Weck, our speaker today. Daniel Weck is a highly skilled developer, and when I say highly, it's really highly skilled developer. And he shares his workload between DAISY, the DAISY Consortium, and Idea Lab. We are working together since the creation of the lab, and we would not be at the point where we are today without Daniel's help. Richard Horn will moderate this session today. Richard is the CEO of DAISY, the global partnership of organizations committed to create an accessible landscape for digital publishing. I know Richard from several years now, and I think that his effort on moving DAISY forward are amazing. So let's don't wait, and I leave the floor to Daniel and Richard to present the new features of Thorium.
Okay, hello everybody. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. Let's move to the slide deck. There it is. Okay, is the slide deck showing correctly?
Yep, that's looking good.
Lovely, thank you. All right, so the title of this presentation with Richard today is Thorium Reader Evolves, and it keeps accessibility in focus. So Laurent already made very generous introductions for myself. So without further ado, let's move to the next slide. Thorium Reader is a reading app which supports the EPUB format, refillable publications, as well as fixed layout, pixel perfect, PDF-like publications, talking books using the EPUB 3 media overlays standard, as well as read aloud with TTS synthetic speech. We also support emerging standards from the W3C, such as packaged audiobooks. We'll get to see a bit more of that later in the presentation. Thorium supports OPDS catalogs. So as you can imagine, there's a local bookshelf in the app, and there's also access to remote bookshelves via the OPDS format version 1 and the more recent version 2 of the standard. And finally, on this slide, Thorium supports the LCP DRM standard for library lending. It's an open standard. I'll give you a small demo, and during the Q&A session, feel free to ask any questions if you have some. Laurent is our go-to expert in this field, so you're in good company today. So Thorium is a desktop app for desktop class operating systems, Windows 10, macOS, and Linux distributions such as Ubuntu. Note that this list doesn't include Chrome laptops and Chrome OS, just so you're aware of that. Thorium is built with a cross-platform application framework called Electron. I won't dive into too many details in this presentation, but again, during the Q&A, feel free to fire away with geeky questions if you have any. Thorium is free software. We really must thank EDR Lab for offering this app to the world as an alternative on desktop platforms to the now defunct Microsoft Edge implementation in their Edge browser, which has now switched to Chromium. And in that transition, they have lost EPUB support. So on Windows, Thorium is now a prime alternative. On Mac, of course, a standard EPUB reader app ships with the operating system. It's called Books, used to be called iBooks. So again, Thorium is an alternative which you can use to automatically open your EPUB publications when you double click on the file, for example. Thorium is free also because it is open source software. We host our source code at GitHub. I'll just spell it out for those of you who are taking notes: github.com/edrlab/thorium-reader. Obviously, the slides will be downloadable, and I will remind you of the link at the very end of the slideshow. So as you probably have guessed by now, Thorium is a labor of love. It's made with love, but it's also critically made with Rhedium. Rhedium is an SDK. It's a software development kit, which can be used to build reading systems, as we call them internally, or reading apps. And as a matter of fact, there are other apps built with Rhedium, such as an iOS app for Apple devices, iPhone and iPad. There's an Android app as well. There's an ongoing effort to implement a web reader based on the Rhedium SDK. And here I'm just talking about the test apps that are in the open source domain. There are, of course, also commercial initiatives around the Rhedium SDK, which, by the way, has been an ongoing effort since 2014, thereabout. So we're just embarking onto a revision of that architecture, which is more performant, more modular, and which aligns much better with the latest web technologies. So again, I won't go into too much detail in this presentation. Please ask questions in the Q&A if you have any. Well, without further ado, it's time for demos. I thought it'd be a lot more entertaining to switch to a live instance of Thorium because I like taking risks. So there we are. So this is Thorium, freshly installed. This is not actually the official version that's distributed in the Windows 10 store. It is based on the latest code, which is not released yet, but you can download the automated builds that we provide at github.com if you want to test, have an early preview of what's coming next. So this is the splash window in Thorium, and this is the empty library. So I'm going to start by adding a publication into my local library, just using drag and drop. So here is one of my favorite books, Accessible EPUB 3, authored by Matt Garish and a few others. So once a publication is added in library, we can have a look at its information card. We can add tags, so I'll just add my name here. And of course, we can just choose to read the publication as well. and this is the reader view, which we'll come back to in a moment. So I'll go back to the library view to explore it a little bit more in depth. So this is my local bookshelf. If I now move to the catalogs tab, this is the OPDS feature. So this is an interface that gives me access to remote catalogs. So here I'm just going to enter and copy paste a link which I had in my clipboard, pointing to the Feedbooks open repository of publications. There are public domain publications as well as commercial ones in this feed. So I'm going to have a look at the public domain ones. So this is all happening live. We're connecting to the network and we're looking at a live instance on the server of a library of publications. So I'm going to go to free books and most popular, scrolling down to, there we go, Alice in Wonderland. Let's take the first one in the list. So as you can see already, we have, I don't know, maybe 50 publications here. If I scroll to the bottom, there is a next button, so I can navigate the paginated view of many hundreds, if not thousands, of publications in this particular library. So I'm just going to pick Alice in Wonderland. Again, the information card shows me that the publication has been tagged with predefined tags, fiction and fantasy here. I'm just going to import it now. That's it, it's done. It's a small book, probably a few hundred kilobytes. And it is now in my local library. As you can see, the library is divided into different sections. One where I can resume reading or listening. We'll see later on that we can open audiobooks as well. And one that shows me which books have recently been added. So now let's go back to, let's see, move this here. Let's go back to my file system. I have prepared a selection of books, which I would like to import now. So we have an audiobook here. The extension is .audiobook. It's an emerging standard, so you won't find many of those in the market. But it is a very lightweight, very efficient way of authoring audiobooks, like a playlist of audio files with rich navigation built into the file and rich metadata. And it really is just a zip file. You could just rename the extension to zip and unzip the contents, and you would see the MP3 files and so forth. So again, drag and drop. And there we are. So it now shows up in a dedicated section for audiobooks. And if I have a look at the information card, it tells me that the book is an hour long, an hour and a half. It's got 5 tracks. And I can choose to read it.
Chapter 1 of Armand Durand.
Now, I'm assuming you're hearing this. Is that correct?
Yes,
This
that's
is a
working, Daniel.
LibriVox record.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, okay, so this is just a standard sort of audiobook interface where I can sort of go back 30 seconds, forward 30 seconds, choose the speech rate.
All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer.
All right. At the bottom here, I have access to all the chapters, in this case, 5 tracks, akin to chapters, let's say. And you can see that I can just choose to...
If I am... That too often is. In more over the birth of a male.
Redirect the book to a particular precise position in the book. I have bookmarks. So if I Control B with my keyboard or choose to click the icon with the mouse here, I can place bookmarks. If I move to somewhere else in the book,
And Genevieve's, he dryly replied.
Place another bookmark. Now go to the bookmark navigation view. They all show up here with the percentage and the timestamp associated with them. I can download, I can delete them, and I can also change the label if I want to, so that I give them a more human readable label. Lastly, with this audiobook demo, I can change the theme of both the user interface as well as the book content, or here in this case, the audio player. So for example, night mode,
resuming the pipe he had momentarily laid down,
would look like this. As you can see, the controls are updated to account for the new style. So going back to the normal
that answer might do for a stranger.
Neutral mode and back in the library. Okay, so the next books which I would like to demonstrate now, multilingual, or rather foreign language books. I'm based in the UK, but I'm French. So for me, Arabic, Hebrew, and Japanese are foreign languages. So I'm going to pick 5 publications here, add them into my library. There we are. Just to show you that we've got support for Arabic. So here's an example. So I'm going to click the left arrow button, which means next, because we're in a right to left progression context here. As you can see, the text is right aligned, but everything works as expected, including synthetic speech. So if I click on the audio icon at the top in the toolbar.
الفصل الثاني. ما هو السرطان؟ من أين؟
All right, so you see the progression from right to left. If I turn pages, sorry, there we go. So here I'm in scroll mode. You can see that I'm in a vertical scroll configuration. Using the settings, I can opt for a paginated view, which presents me with 2 columns because I'm on the landscape wide display here. And you can see that I'm progressing forward in the publication from right to left. Okay, now let's move back to the library. A quick look at Hebrew, which works the same way. This particular book has a few images and captions for the images. I can't read any of this, so I'm not sure what it says. I hope it's not rude. Finally, Japanese. So Japanese is an interesting one because it is vertical writing mode. As you can see, we're going from right to left and from top to bottom. So we have these columns of text. In the top right corner here, we have a number, that's 1. And you can see I can make selections of the text in vertical writing mode. And we're progressing forward again from right to left. All right, so back in the library, let's have a look at another class of publications. This is fixed layout, PDF-like pixel perfect publications, but they are authored, created with HTML and CSS. They're like web pages, really. Let's have a look. There we are. Starting with this one. So it's a children's book. I don't know if you can tell on the video, but the animated character here is yawning. Here we have a 2-page spread, again with animated characters, and the text, the little pieces of text there, short sentences, are synchronized with audio. So there's human voice recorded, then synchronized with the text. So here, if we play the, if we click the play button at the top in the toolbar.
Dinner's over, tummy fed. Llama, llama, time for bed. Time to brush and fill the tub. Time to splish.
All right, again, it's human voice, but I can pick a speech rate. So let's go quite a lot faster here.
And splash and scrub. PJs on, then potty time. Choose a book with silly rhymes. Snuggle in. Turn out the light. Llama, llama, nighty night.
All right, please do not fall asleep. This is very cute, but we have a lot more to see. So let's go back to the library. Here is another example of a, I would say, more sophisticated fixed layout publication, just to showcase some of Thorium's features. So this is the cover page. Now let's move on to the next page, and you will hear a background soundtrack, which I will not be able to stop. It's just continuously looping in the background. As I turn pages, it's uninterrupted. So let's go for it. Okay. I can now enter my name in the box here. Lower the volume a bit. That's better. So this book allows me to enter my name. And the book remembers my name. I can close the book, come back to it, and it will remember who I am. And you can see in that text box here that it is showing my name in the text. I move to the next page. 2-page spread. On the left-hand side, we have some lovely animations, videos, as a matter of fact. And on the right page here, we have a play button, which invites me to click it. And this is actually EPUB 3 media overlay. So it will synchronize the text below it with human recorded narration. Let's listen to it.
In the land of Galdovia,
You can see the text highlighting here in red.
where the wild
I can
wind
interact with the
whistles
text
while the
to
songbirds
pop
sing.
up definitions and things like that.
Take a wander through forest.
Let's stop it and move back. Excellent. So one last example with media overlays. This is a more traditional reflowable book. So whereas the books or iBooks application on Mac and iPad and iPhones has a limitation with synchronized text audio media overlays. They can only play synchronized text audio with fixed layer publications. That is not the case with Thorium. We fully support media overlays in reflowable publications. This is a reflowable publication. You can see the text is quite small here, so let me just increase the font size to really show you that it is a reflowable publication. Let's change the font, the typeface, and let's increase the line spacing. And I can now play media overlays, again, using the audio icon at the top here.
Buck did not read the newspapers, or he would have known that trouble was...
All right, so you can see the yellow highlight here is defined by content creators. It's authored in the publication. This is not Thorium's decision to highlight the text in yellow. It's a choice that the editors made. Also, you can see that it's synchronized at the sentence level.
Brewing, not alone for himself, but for every... Because men groping in the Arctic, these men wanted dogs.
Right, so you saw me moving forward using the next arrow, and this granularity level is sentence by sentence. Some books are word by word, just like the children's books we saw earlier on. Again, this is a choice at the publisher level. This is not synthetic speech in Thorium. It's pre-recorded human voice created by the content creators. Okay, so let's go back now and let's have a look at... Let's have a look at LCP. So again, drag and drop. This is an EPUB that is protected with the LCP DRM. Once I've opened it, I can check the information card for it. You can see that there is now an LCP section at the bottom, which tells me that out of 2,000 characters, which I'm allowed to copy in the clipboard, I'm at 0. I haven't copied anything yet. And there is also a limitation in the number of print copies. Note, however, that Thorium does not have a print feature at the moment, so we can't do that right now. There are no restrictions in terms of synthetic speech. Books protected with LCP can use TTS, read aloud, which is obviously a necessity in terms of accessibility for some categories of users. Okay, let's open it. Now, as you can see, the book doesn't open because I haven't specified my passphrase yet. So this is just a sample book. The passphrase is Dan. There we are. And the book opens. You can see very easy. It's just a passphrase or password-based DRM. You could take that book, read it in another reading system if you weren't happy with Thorium. There's no vendor lock-in. It's an interoperable standard LCP, which Laurent will be able to tell us more about in the Q&A if you're interested. Okay, we are now in a book called Wasteland, which is sort of poetry, multilingual poetry. So let's reduce the size of the text here so we can see more of it. So we can see some Latin, some English, some Greek. I can tell you there's Italian, French, and German further down in the book, but let's not go there. Let's just have a quick look at the TTS and how it copes with multilingual.
Nam sibilum quidum cumus ego civility thelis. Responda. Poth.
Comma. 4 Ezra pound. Il miglior fabbro.
Okay, so in this quick demo, we heard Latin, Greek, and Italian, and we heard different voices. There was a male voice and an Italian and a female voice for the Italian part. At this point in time, Thorium doesn't give users control over what synthetic voice to use. Users can't pick a male or a female voice, anything like that. At this point in time, this is something we'll be working on in the coming months, we hope. Okay, let's move back to the library now. And we're getting to the end of my list here. This book is Linear Algebra. It's my go-to book for testing maths or MathML. So MathML is mathematical markup in HTML. Let's move to a chapter that has some mathematical equations. This one, there we go. So by default, as you can see, it doesn't look great. We're looking at some sort of linearized version of mathematical equations. It's not very readable. And that's because by default, the web browser engine that we use to render HTML here is called Chromium. It's the same web browser engine that's used in Microsoft Edge, in Chrome, Google Chrome, and in many other web browsers, including those on Android smartphones. And by default, unfortunately, at this stage, Chromium does not support MathML. Thankfully, in Thorium, we integrate a library called MathJax, which will activate or which will render the MathML. So tick the box here in the settings. When I scroll down, now we have some lovely looking mathematical equations. This is just MathJax standard from, it's an open source project, so we use it directly from their code base. And it comes with a menu which controls some of the rendering aspects. We know there are bugs, but we'd love to hear feedback. So if you're into these kinds of publications, please let us know if you have feature requests or bug reports. We'd be very happy to hear from you. All right, and finally, my last book here is Georgia, which is a referable book. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because it's a book that contains links. Now, as you can see, I'm navigating the links here using the keyboard. I'm tabbing into each individual hyperlink that's within the document. And they're outlined with a blue outline, which is in fact the outline that we use throughout in the application. So if you take a look at the top toolbar, you can see that I'm tabbing into each icon button and they get highlighted in blue whenever I use the keyboard. So to give some visual emphasis on where the keyboard focus is. And the same applies to the content within the viewport here. So I'm now focused on link number 2, which I believe is a footnote. So if I click on it either with the mouse or the keyboard, here I'm doing it with the keyboard, you can see that I have a pop-up footnote which shows me additional information. And it's a scrollable footnote. As you can see, I can interact with it just like I would with any text. Again, that's a feature that we don't find very often in reading systems. Let me show you, for example, if I increase the font size, choose the sepia theme to be easy on the eye, and change the font face to a dyslexia-friendly typeface. And if I now look at the pop-up footnote, you can see it adapts the exact same styles, where in sepia we have the nice, larger font, more legible, and the typeface. All right, and we're now going to reset all the settings, go back to the library view. So this concludes my overview of the bookshelf, opening readers, and lastly, I will just show you segue into the settings where we can change keyboard shortcuts. So I've told you about navigating the user interface using the tab key or the arrow keys. We also have a number of keyboard shortcuts. For example, Control B, like bookmark. We have Control N for navigation. And now all these shortcuts are documented here in the settings view. And I can also change them from here. So if I'm unhappy with a particular keyboard shortcut, it doesn't suit my workflow, I can change it. So for example, here, Control W closes the reader window. So if I click the edit button, I can choose to activate Shift and Alt as well as Control. I can choose from a predefined list other keys on my keyboard. I can also just put my cursor in this blue box here, which captures whatever keystrokes I'm doing. So here I'm going to do Control D, right? And it's immediately reflected in the editor here, or Control Shift Alt G. There we are. So obviously I don't want that. I'm going to cancel. And by the way, all of this is accessible to screen readers. Expert users who perhaps want to load a predefined keyboard scheme that they have for all their apps can choose to edit the file directly. This is an advanced feature. You can actually access what's behind the scenes and edit the file yourself. But for most users, we recommend using this editor section here. And whilst we're in the settings section, at the top here, we have the translations available currently for Thorium, English being the default on my computer here, but there is French as well, Français. So when I choose Français, the user interface automatically switches to that language. We don't have to restart the app, it just happens on the fly. We have Deutsch, which is German, we have Spanish, Espanol, and Dutch. So those are our current languages. Going back to English, and this marks the end of my presentation, of my demo. So I will hand the controls over to Richard now, who will go into more in-depth look at accessibility features. I'll stop sharing my screen. There you go.
Okay, so if I move to the next slide on here, can you just confirm that I'm sharing this screen? What is an accessible reading app?
Yeah.
Daniel, great, thank you. So thank you, Daniel, for a great demo there. The title of this session, as you'll know, is Thorium Reader Evolves, Keeps Accessibility in Focus. So I'm going to bring the focus to accessibility now, and I'm going to tell you about the formalized evaluations we've done with Thorium Reader and the feedback received from people with disabilities and college disability officers. EPUB's often referred to as the most accessible publishing format ever. And what do we mean by that? Well, it means it works for everyone, for people with print disabilities, such as blindness, low vision, specific learning differences, such as dyslexia, and people with physical disabilities that limits their ability to hold a book or turn the pages, but also for people with temporary impairments, such as a migraine headache, a sprained wrist, or a backache, and for people without disabilities, but with a situational requirements, such as reading on a smaller screen, reading in the dark, or in bright sunlight, or whilst walking or training in the gym. But a reading app, a reading experience rather, is the combination of many things, not only the care that the author has taken and the format that the publication is in, but also the reading app, like we're talking about today. Because for an ebook to be accessible, both the contents and the reading app must be accessible. So whilst there's an accessibility specification for EPUB, the file format, what does it mean for a reading system to be accessible? Well, in an effort led by the DAISY Consortium, we aim to address that question. We work with a combination of people with print disabilities, accessibility experts, and reading systems developers, and over the years we've developed a set of fundamental requirements that sets a bar for accessibility. This is at epubtest.org. The testing's done with a set of standardized EPUB files, and it can be used with reading apps on any platform. And we've got a volunteer pool of around 60 people from all around the world who've signed up to help with testing apps with the assistive technologies that they personally use. So they give us real-world evaluations, but in a standardized format. I'm one of the people in that team, and I'm really pleased to join you today to provide feedback on our findings of the Thorium Reader. In our tests, we look at four main areas. These are our kind of fundamental accessibility tests. We look at basic functionality, non-visual reading, visual adjustments, and read aloud. And we've seen that Daniel's actually demonstrated some of these features already. If you want to learn more about the testing, you can read about the approach and review some video explainers too at the Inclusive Publishing website. But let's dig in a little bit into the basic features piece rather than speaking about the testing approaches. The basic fundamentally tests section is usually done by someone who's using a screen reader, and we cover things like starting the app, exploring the available content and opening a title, navigating a publication using the table of contents, using page navigation, moving backwards and forwards across page boundaries, adding and reviewing bookmarks, highlights, and notes. So let's dig into this a little bit with Thorium. I'm going to drop to my desktop and start Thorium. It's really simple to start. It's easy to open a publication, as Daniel has shown. And in terms of navigation, if I move to the table of contents, which we saw briefly with Daniel, I want to point out that this is presented in a structured view with highlighting. And as we'll see in a demonstration in a short while, this is structured so that someone who's using a screen reader is able to navigate through this in a really meaningful way. It's also possible back in that library view to be able to search within the titles you've got, to add titles for the books, to review this in the mode we have at the moment with the cover images, but also in a list view. And so these basic features work really well. Let's then turn to the next section, which is visual adjustments. Here we look at the ability to be able to reflow the page content, to adjust the text size, to choose from different fonts, personalize the colors, and adjust the spacing. For some users, these visual adjustments are the killer features of EPUB. It transforms the experience beyond reading print books or using a print type layout such as PDF. In this section of the testing, we're looking at these sorts of things to be able to adjust these different features and meet the individual needs of the reader. On a smartphone, the utility of reflow and adjustable text size are probably self-evident, but how are they relevant on a desktop app? Let's take a look. If I pop back into Thorium and go into a title, of course, I can adjust the size of this text by moving up the size here. And then if I'm a student, I may well be wanting to maybe have the app one side of the screen and then a word processor on the other side. And by using the reflow feature, it means that I don't have to pan backwards and forwards to be able to see the text and read through it without going backwards and forwards. Let's just make this a little bit bigger. And we see how the text is reflowing. People with dyslexia often prefer a larger font, and people with low vision, of course, go larger still. And colors are also important. For people with dyslexia, they often prefer a lower contrast. They find white text on a black background, black text on a white background too glaring. So something like the sepia theme that's offered in Thorium can work really well. Whereas someone with low vision, they may want the highest contrast possible and might choose to use the white text on a black background. And Thorium gives us these abilities too. Let's pop back to that sepia setting. We've also got options to adjust the margins within Thorium. So if I go into spacing, here I've got the ability to change the margin, the word spacing, the letter spacing, and the line spacing. So I'm going to just bring the margins in a bit, increase the word spacing, and then add a bit more space between the lines. So these sorts of adjustments can make a really big difference to the reading speed and the reading comprehension of people, for example, with low vision or with a reading difference such as dyslexia. And in our estimation, Thorium offers more of these sorts of adjustments than really any comparable other reading apps. When we come to non-visual reading, we are using a screen reader, which is a piece of software that would be used together with text-to-speech and or a braille display. So this is how someone who is deafblind would read an ebook. And we make sure it's possible to navigate within the publication, not just read the text, that's obvious, isn't it? But you want to be able to navigate by moving through the headings and navigating through the headings, to be able to meaningfully navigate through paragraphs, read line by line, word by word, and by character. And when you encounter objects such as lists, Images and links, you should be able to know that you've reached them and be able to interact with them if appropriate. Images are hopefully often described with alt text, and it shouldn't be that you just hear the alt text, you should be able to navigate within it. There could be difficult words in there, words you want to spell out, there could be quite a lot of it. So we look for the ability to meaningfully navigate using the text-to-speech, the alt text. And when you encounter a table, you should be able to explore that, read down by row, across by columns, and when you're in a cell, be able to read the row heading and the column heading for that particular cell. And as we saw from Daniel's demonstration, modern ebooks make extensive use of hyperlinks within the title and outside, and it should be possible to discover you've reached those and to be able to navigate within the book too. So rather than me trying to demonstrate live this screen reader feature, which is kind of difficult to do and takes some time, I'll show a demonstration that I put together with a colleague of mine, George Kershaw, and I've captioned this so those of you who aren't so used to listening to text-to-speech may find it easier to understand what the speech is saying. So this really it runs for about 4.5 minutes.
And here we go with our screen reader demo. Okay, NVDA with Thorium, and we're using the book Intro to Brain and Behavior by Macmillan Learning. I've opened Thorium, and it remembers the last place I was reading in this book and opens to that page. But I want to start by showing you the navigation. So I'm going to, and you're going to hear the screen reader.
Reading view menu navigation landmark list with 4 items, list with 4 items, navigation graphic button.
So there's the button.
List with 5
navigation.
items, table of contents button.
Table of contents.
Button landmarks.
I've got landmarks, annotations, go to page, bookmarks.
Button out of list button graphic nav list with 5 items button table of contents.
And here's the table of contents. So this is
table of contents list with 23 items heading level 1 link up.
There's this is the structured view of the table of contents. So if I use my screen reader navigation keys to go to the first level 1, I just hit the number 1.
Chapter 1, what are the origins of brain and behavior? Link heading level 1.
And I could use my next heading key.
List with 8 items, clinical focus 1-1: living with traumatic brain injury, link heading level 2.
Or move down.
Heading level 2, link 1-1, the brain in the 21st century.
Or I could go to the next chapter.
Chapter 2, what is the nervous system's functional anatomy? Link heading level 1. List with 9 items, heading level 2, link research focus 2-1: a genesis of the cerebellum.
So this is a college textbook, obviously.
Heading level 2, link 2-1, overview of brain function and structure.
So let's go there.
Main content, main landmark, main content, region clickable, main content, main content. 33-2-1 overview of brain function and structure. The brain's primary function is to produce movement, and collectively this is termed behavior. To produce effective behavior, we take in sensory information.
So I'm on page 33. It told me that and started reading. And I can press down arrow to read by line.
The brain's primary function is to produce movement, and collectively this is termed behavior. To produce effective behavior, we take in sensory information such as vision, audition, olfaction.
Oh boy, some words there.
Effective.
I'm going word by word.
Behavior, we take in sensory information such as vision, audition.
Audition, how do you spell that?
A-U-D-I-T-I-O-N.
So
November.
I can navigate by line, word, character.
Tip complementary landmark principle 1: the nervous system produces
by blocks of text. So this happens to be a navigation,
this
a landmark.
Stimuli the brain cannot.
I can go quickly to that landmark.
Tip complementary landmark tip principle 1: the nervous system produces movement in a perceptual world the brain constructs. Plastic patterns of neural organization region, plastic patterns of neural organization, heading level 3.
So I just moved to the next heading. So it's very important for the blind person to be able to navigate very quickly through the book. So we already went to the table of contents, directly into a section, and in that section, we could navigate by headings or landmarks, but we can also go to a particular page.
Heading level 23-3 genes, cells, and behavior.
So I'm going to demonstrate going to a page.
Reading view menu, navigation, landmark, list with 4 items, list with 4 items, list with 5 button, landmark, button on the go to page.
So I'm going to go to the page.
Enter a page number, focus mode.
And I'm going to go to page
1, 2, 0. Browse mode. Go to button. Gen 120 separate.
So I'm now on page 120. If the teacher had told me turn to page 120, I can get there very quickly.
On neuronal dendrites, these areas
and
contain gated channels that can open
like
and close.
I do anywhere else.
Okay. So George was using JAWS there. We also use it with the NVDA screen reader in our evaluations. And of course, on macOS, we use it with the VoiceOver screen reader. That video should give you an idea of how Thorium Reader works with the screen reader. Also, you probably heard the enthusiasm in George's voice. Thorium is now his go-to app for reading EPUBs. It's not only blind people that make use of text-to-speech, it's also a really critical feature for people with low vision, who would use it together with really large text, and for people with learning differences such as dyslexia. Our test protocol, well, that examines the experience in the reading app with the read aloud. We look at the ability to start the read aloud, reliably pause and resume, check that the contents are read in the correct order, that the text is read aloud in a meaningful and not in a distracting way. So in some read aloud systems we've come across, for example, it runs together the text of the heading with the following paragraph. So on the screen here we have introduction followed by chapter 2 reviewed. Because there's no full stop, it would say introduction chapter 2 reviewed. So some intelligence in the part of the text to speech and the read aloud, meaning that it really makes sense when you listen to the contents. This is something we look for. And we learn from people with dyslexia and the organization supporting them that visually highlighting the text is really beneficial in providing a multimodal way of reading that really reinforces comprehension and builds the acquisition of reading skills. Now, we've already seen from Daniel a demonstration of the text-to-speech. Not only we saw that, we saw it working in different languages. So for the purpose of time, I'll skip over that little demo and just give you some closing reflections from our accessibility testing on where we feel that Thorium Reader is today. So as Daniel said, it meets a need for a desktop reading app that is stable and feature rich and is accessible too. And this is especially welcome on the macOS platform where we had very few choices previously. It's great that the attention that EDR Lab have paid to the accessibility requirements is really bringing benefits. The evaluation results we're getting when we're showing it to people with reading disabilities and the staff supporting them, just coming out with really, really great plaudits. And great to hear from Daniel and the team about the work that's underway to add even more keyboard shortcuts. There are some things, of course, we would like to have implemented, but maybe at this stage, I'll move over for Daniel to finish with his closing remarks too.
Thank you, Richard. Really great demos and showcase of accessibility features. So I'm now going to take over the screen. There we go. And back to the slideshow. All right. So in the interest of time, and I apologize for stealing some of your time, Richard, you did a great job being swift here, much better than I did. So work in progress. You've already mentioned a few things that we're working on. I would like to mention in this closing slide, search. We're working on accessible search. We have the feature is nearly ready. It's going to be part of the next official release this June. Search as in being presented with a list of search results that is accessible to screen reader and keyboard users, as well as in-document highlights of the search results. Keyboard shortcuts, you've already mentioned that. We are considering implementing support for annotations and highlighting pieces of text and storing annotations. We don't have a super concrete plan for this, but hopefully this year we'll be able to get that done. And we're working on improving many features, but in particular TTS support and synthetic speech. I've already mentioned the ability to select voices, male or female, etc. Improvements for screen readers, NVDA, JAWS, as Richard mentioned, but there are a few others, and it's a bit of a minefield out there. It's very difficult to offer consistent support for all the screen readers. But we are dedicated to making that happen. So my last slide is just a reminder of where to find us at GitHub and, of course, edrlab.org. So without further ado, I have noted some questions from our participants. Thank you very much for your patience. We've got 9 minutes to the top of the hour. So if you don't mind, I'll walk through them. First question was, the progression bar when going from right to left should also be inversed. And you are absolutely correct. This is a known bug. We do not actually implement mirroring the user interface. We don't support right to left translations of our user interface. And as a result, we're not ready yet to inverse the progress bar at the bottom as well. Media overlays, the scroll text progress matches the playing audio. Yes, of course. So we pass the official test suite that is available at epubtest.org, and it's a test suite that is created by some of the DAISY members. And one of the success criteria is for the highlight of the text to be scrolled into view or paginated in the correct place if we're using a paginating mode, of course. Also, the text can be interacted with the mouse. So if you click on the text, it will just redirect playback to that particular location. That could be a word or a sentence or a paragraph. It depends on how the media overlay is authored in the first place. Somebody's asking about an iOS Thorium app. Well, there are iOS Redium apps or apps that are based on the Redium SDK, but Thorium really is and will remain for the foreseeable future a desktop-only app for Windows 10, Linux, and Mac, and not for Chrome OS, I'm afraid. As for synchronizing the desktop app with a mobile app on an Android smartphone, for example, such as synchronizing the bookmarks and in the future annotations as well, we don't have that in our roadmap just because it's quite a big feature that I don't think we'll have the resources to implement, but it's an open source project. So obviously we do invite these kinds of feature requests and see if there is interest in the community to help us implement this. The next question is about MathML and LaTeX. So LaTeX syntax in books, I believe MathJax indeed understands the LaTeX syntax. I've not tried books myself that have LaTeX instead of MathML, so I cannot comment on that, but we're using the vanilla standard version of MathJax. So if it is supported by MathJax, it will be supported by Thorium. Next question is about the green outline. It's a great question. So those of you who noticed the green rectangular shape around portions of text, this is an indicator of the current reading location. So whenever the user navigates a hyperlink that is inside the publication document or via the table of content in the user interface Chrome, on the right-hand side, the navigation panel, whenever the user jumps to a new location, we display a temporary highlight which fades away after a couple of seconds. We find that it's extremely useful especially in the context of a two-page spread in a paginated view, where there's a lot of text and the user, including myself, gets really confused about where exactly am I supposed to look. So this is a visual indicator that we find very useful. We welcome feedback on this. It's not been A/B tested. It's not been thoroughly tested. It's something that we put out. We have shipped it, and we're hoping that it's useful to many. And finally, the last question I have here in my list is annotations. Do we have plans to incorporate support for, let's say, hypothesis? Well, in the previous incarnation of Readium, we had prototypal support for hypothesis. It was an experiment. It wasn't really meant to be a final product. And it worked reasonably well. It was in the cloud reader, the web reader, where obviously hypothesis sits very well in that context, itself being a web feature. We do have plans to, as I said, incorporate support for creating annotations, and we do intend to support the W3C format, which would make the annotations in Thorium interoperable with other reading systems. We would allow users to export them to a standard format that could be exchanged via emails or so forth. We don't have a concrete plan yet, but this is something we really want to work on. So I'm now going to go back to the chat box in Swapcard.
Or I can just add the two questions you didn't answer. The George demo about Thorium, is there a public link for that, Richard?
There isn't now, but there will be later today. I'll just finish captioning the longer version of that demo. So George also shows some other really important features. I'll caption that and then I'll put that up. And then what would you like me to do with the link?
We can easily add the link to the Swapcard app.
Very good.
This session, and all the participants will be able to get it easily.
Super. And I should be sharing my screen now with a sepia EPUB page open.
Mm-hmm.
So the other question was about the ability to change the speed of the text to speech as it's read out.
Yes.
This was your second question. So I didn't get to do that demo, so now I get a chance to do that. So up here in the center of the top bar here, on this bar here, there's a speaker, which is to activate the text to speech. If I click
gathering
on that,
information, sensing,
it will start reading. I just paused it now for a moment. And just to the right of the transports, we've got the ability to change the speed here. So I can make it slower, half the speed, and also double the speed.
Gathering information, sensing, dealing with facts that can be objective.
I'll just pay the team a few more compliments at this point. We've looked at lots of different implementations of read aloud in reading systems, and Thorium does a great job of enabling someone to really determine where the text should start reading from. Sometimes it even starts at the top of the chapter and you can't control it. Here you can define exactly where it should start reading within the view. And once you've got the text-to-speech function actually working, you can tell it that you want
type
it to
theories
start
of personality,
reading from
identify a number
specific
of types of personality.
And of course, you can navigate backwards and forwards. So good job, team.
Great. Yes. Good job. Good job, Daniel. Good job, Pierre. So thank you. It was a very interesting demo. Great demo. I will just close up by saying that, okay, there are many things to create still on Thorium. With us a very small team. We are planning the next sprints. We know that we've got some cleanup to do, changing the database, some optimizations, the audiobook user interface to clean up also, to be better with the narrator, screen reader maybe. We've got many features that we would like to add, annotations, especially PDF with LCP, PDF protected by LCP for libraries would be great. OPDS with authentication also for libraries would be great. ASEAN localization, we don't have any ASEAN language in the localization at the moment. But okay, we will go step by step, select one feature after the other. As Daniel said, if some good developers on Electron.js or TypeScript are ready to help us, they are welcome. If we've got more financial help, we will be able to hire somebody else. So let's see what happens. And I hope you will really benefit from Thorium today on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Have a good day. Have a good day. Goodbye. And thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Richard.
Cheerio.
Bye, everybody.